The autumn air carried a crisp bite as Jake Mitchell walked past the gleaming high-rises of downtown Chicago, his leather jacket still carrying the faint scent of grease from the auto shop. He'd just dropped off a restored Mustang to a client in one of those luxury apartments and was mentally mapping out his next coffee stop when a sound cut through the city's hum, a small, ragged cough. There, curled on the bottom step of a marble staircase, was a little girl. Her name, he'd soon learn, was Lily. Her dark curls framed a face too pale for someone so young, and her tiny fingers clutched a threadbare teddy bear with a blue hospital tag peeking out from its paw. The sight hit him like a punch to the gut. Jake crouched beside her, his voice softer than he'd used in years. "Hey, kiddo. You need help." Lily lifted her eyes, and in that moment he saw it the same exhausted determination his younger sister had worn during her chemo treatments. "Mom's upstairs." Lily whispered, her breath uneven. "But my legs don't work right today." She paused, then added with a faint smile, "If you carry me, I'll tell you a secret. A really good one." He scooped her up without another thought. She weighed nothing, her body fragile against his chest. As he climbed, he noticed the pediatric oncology ward sticker on her bear, and his throat tightened. Halfway up, Lily's voice, barely audible, broke the silence. "Promise me something." Jake slowed his steps. "When I'm not here anymore, will you check on my mom? She forgets to eat when she's sad." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Before he could respond, the door at the top flew open. Standing there was a woman, Sarah, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes widening as they darted from Jake to Lily. "What happened? Who are you?" Her voice cracked with panic. "She asked me to bring her up," Jake said gently, transferring Lily into Sarah's arms. The little girl stirred, murmuring, "Mom, he's nice, like Daddy was." Sarah's face crumpled for a split second before she steadied herself. Later, over a cup of coffee, Jake never intended to stay, for Sarah confessed how isolated she'd felt since her husband's passing, how Lily's illness had swallowed every ounce of her strength. And Jake, who'd spent years avoiding hospitals after losing his sister, found himself offering to fix Sarah's squeaky balcony door, then her car, then her leaky faucet. Each visit came with Lily's whispered secrets. "Mom loves daisies," or "She cries when she thinks I'm asleep." One evening, as autumn faded into winter, Sarah handed Jake a photo album. "Lily wanted you to have this," she said, her voice thick. Inside were pictures of a grinning little girl, a bear clutched in every shot. On the last page, a note in wobbly handwriting, "Tell Mom, it's okay to be happy again." Jake didn't realize he was crying until Sarah reached for his hand. And in that quiet apartment with the wind rattling the windows they'd fixed together, something broken began to mend. The car door clicked shut behind Lyla, but not before she pressed something into Isaac's palm, a folded origami star, the edges slightly crumpled from being clutched too tightly. "For luck," she mouthed through the window as the car pulled away. Diane offered a hesitant nod, her eyes lingering on Isaac just a second longer than necessary, as if she couldn't decide whether to thank him or warn him to stay away. Isaac stood there, the paper star burning a hole in his hand. He'd planned to leave the city that afternoon, to drift like he always did. But now, as he unfolded the star, he found a child's messy scrawl inside Mom's favorite song, "Is Landslide." "Play it for her." His throat tightened. He'd heard that song 1,000 times in garages and roadside bars, his fingers absently strumming the chords on his guitar, the one he hadn't touched since his sister's funeral. That night, rain lashed against the windows of Diane's apartment. Lyla was asleep after another grueling treatment, and Diane sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of unpaid medical bills. A knock at the door startled her. Isaac stood on the threshold, soaked to the bone, an old guitar case in one hand and a takeout bag in the other. "I, thought you could use a break," he said, shifting awkwardly. Diane's exhaustion warred with suspicion, But the smell of hot soup tomato basil, Lila's favorite, made her step aside. He didn't mention the note. Instead, after they ate, he pulled out the guitar. Diane stiffened when the first chords of Landslide filled the room. "How did you—" Her voice broke. Isaac kept playing, his eyes on the floor. "Lila's got good taste," he murmured. And then, for the first time in years, Diane Hartley cried, not the silent, controlled tears she saved for hospital bathrooms, but great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Isaac didn't try to comfort her. He just played the song again, slower this time, letting the music say what words couldn't. Later, as the storm raged outside, Lyla padded into the living room, her IV pole trailing behind her. "I knew you'd come," she whispered to Isaac, her smile sleepy but triumphant. Diane reached for her daughter, but Lyla shook her head and climbed onto the couch between them, tucking her feet under Isaac's jacket, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Tell us a story," she demanded. And so he did, about a mechanic who'd forgotten how to stay in one place, until a little girl with a teddy bear taught him that some things are worth holding on to. Diane's hand found his in the dark, her fingers trembling, but sure. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, the kind of quiet that comes before something begins. Diane's grip tightened on her phone. Every instinct screamed not to hand her daughter over to a near stranger, but the way Lyla beamed at Isaac, like he'd hung the moon, made her chest ache. "One condition," Diane said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You call me the second you arrive, and if anything feels off you, I'll bring her straight back." Isaac finished, holding her gaze. There was no defensiveness in his tone, just quiet understanding. He pulled a worn leather keychain from his pocket, a tiny wrench dangling beside a faded photo of a young girl with braids. "My sister Emily," he said, thumb brushing the image. "I'd have given anything for someone to look out for her like this." The raw honesty in his voice undid her. The hospital waiting room was sterile and cold. But Isaac kept Lyla laughing by pretending her teddy bear was a famous detective solving the case of the missing juice box. When the nurse called Lila's name, Isaac hesitated at the doorway. "You want me to come in, kiddo?" Lyla shook her head, clutching her bear. "Mr. Teddy gets scared if I'm not brave first," she confessed. Isaac knelt, tying her shoelace into a double knot. "Then, how about this?" He pressed 2 fingers to his lips, then to her forehead. Extra courage, direct delivery. Back in the apartment, Diane's video call ended abruptly when her CEO noticed the family photo on her desk. Lyla bawled from treatment, grinning in a princess crown. "Take the week," he'd said, an unfamiliar softness in his voice. She was staring at the photo when her phone buzzed. A picture from Isaac, Lyla in a hospital gown giving a thumbs up, beside a scowling teddy bear wrapped in bandages of gauze. The caption read, "Patient and comers demand milkshakes for bravery." That evening, Diane opened her door to find Isaac carrying a sleeping Lyla, her cheeks smeared with chocolate, a new sticker, a silver star this time peeking from her collar. "She aced every test," he whispered. "Doc says her counts are better." Diane's knees nearly buckled with relief. As she took Lyla, Isaac's hand briefly grazed hers, warm and rough from work. Neither pulled away. Later, rummaging for a blanket, Diane found Lila's journal open on the couch. A child's drawing filled the page, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a lopsided sun. The tallest wore a tool belt, the smallest held a bear, and the one in the middle. She had Diane's wild curls and a smile wider than the sky. Outside, Isaac sat on the apartment steps, turning the origami star between his fingers. For the first time in years, the road ahead didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a choice. Diane flung open the door to find Isaac drenched from the storm, his hair plastered to his forehead, a red mechanic's rag clutched in one hand. He didn't wait for an explanation, just strode past her, dropping to his knees beside the couch where Lyla lay, gasping. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he pressed 2 fingers to her wrist. "Her pulse is too fast," he muttered, then yanked the rag open to reveal a Ziploc bag of ice cubes and a small amber bottle. "Pediatrician gave me this for Emily," he said, measuring drops of fever reducer with the precision of a man who'd done it 100 times before. "We need to cool her down now." Diane watched paralyzed as Isaac rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He crushed ice into a dish towel, pressing it gently to Lila's neck, while humming the chorus of Landslide, the same song he'd played on his guitar days earlier. Lila's eyelids fluttered at the sound. Mr. Teddy's scared," she whimpered. Isaac didn't hesitate. He grabbed the stuffed bear from the floor and held it to Lila's chest, his voice dropping into a gruff impersonation. "Nuh-uh, kiddo. Bears don't get scared. We eat scary for breakfast." The absurdity broke through Lila's feverish haze. A weak giggle bubbled up as she clutched the bear tighter. Then the power went out. Pitch black swallowed the apartment save for the occasional flash of lightning. Diane fumbled for her phone's flashlight, but Isaac was already moving. He ripped the emergency glow sticks from his keychain, the kind mechanics used under cars, cracked them, and tossed one to Diane. The green glow cast eerie shadows as he lifted Lyla into his arms. "Stairs," he said. "Elevator's dead, and we're not waiting." Diane followed him down 12 flights, her heart hammering with every step. Halfway down, Lila's breathing hitched dangerously. Isaac didn't break stride. "Hey, detective," he murmured, adjusting her weight so she could hear his heartbeat. "Remember the case of the missing juice box? This is part 2, the stairwell mystery." Lila's fingers twitched against his shirt, her weak "I'm on it" barely audible over the storm. They burst into the flooded street where Isaac's truck sat idling, its hazard lights cutting through the rain. He'd left the driver's door hanging open in his rush. As Diane climbed in, cradling Lyla, she noticed 2 things. The passenger seat was piled with pediatric medical manuals, their pages dog-eared and highlighted. And on the dashboard next to Emily's photo sat a fresh origami star, this one deep blue with Lila's name in crooked letters. The truck fishtailed through the storm, but Isaac drove like a man possessed, shouting updates to the hospital on speakerphone. When they skidded into the ER drop-off, doctors were already waiting with a gurney. As they whisked Lyla away, Diane turned to Isaac, really looked at him. Rain dripped from his lashes. His shirt clung to the scarred outline of an old burn across his collarbone, and in that moment, she understood this man had been fighting his own battles long before he'd carried her daughter up a staircase. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. And when the ER doors swung shut behind Lyla, Diane didn't let go. The garage door was half open when Diane arrived, the sound of a wrench clinking against metal echoing from inside. She hesitated at the threshold, gripping the bakery box tighter. Then she heard Isaac's voice, low and rough, singing off-key to an old rock song, the kind her husband used to play on road trips before the accident. Stepping inside, she found him bent over a vintage Mustang's engine grease streaked across his cheek. He didn't notice her at first, too focused on adjusting something deep in the machinery. On the workbench beside him, propped against a toolbox, was a framed photo she hadn't seen before. A younger Isaac, maybe 16, standing beside a laughing girl with braces, Emily, both of them holding ice cream cones, a hospital wristband visible on her tiny wrist. Diane cleared her throat. Isaac jerked upright, banging his elbow on the hood. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Then his gaze dropped to the bakery box, and something unreadable flickered across his face. "You didn't have to—" "I know," she interrupted, setting the coffee on the bench. The steam curled between them. "The almond croissants are Lila's favorite. She insisted I bring you one." A half-truth. The other 2 pastries in the box were his favorite apple fritters, the kind he'd once mentioned loving during a hospital waiting room conversation. She doubted he even remembered. Isaac wiped his hands on a rag, hesitating before reaching for the coffee. His fingers brushed hers, lingering just a second too long. "How's the detective today?" "Demanding a full report on Mr. Teddy's undercover mission." Diane said, her voice lighter than she felt. She nodded at the photo. "You never told me she liked ice cream." The change in him was instant. His shoulders tensed, but his thumb traced the edge of the frame with a tenderness that made Diane's chest ache. Double chocolate chunk. Even when the chemo made everything taste like metal. He took a swig of coffee, his next words muffled by the cup. Kid had a hell of a sweet tooth. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but charged like the moment before a leap. Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Lyla drew this for you. Isaac unfolded it carefully. The crayon sketch showed 3 figures, a tall one with a wrench, a small one with a bear, and a woman with wild curls. Above them, the sun wore a smiley face. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, Team Brave. Something wet hit the paper. Isaac swiped at his face with the back of his hand, but Diane had already seen it. Without thinking, she stepped closer, her hand covering his on the workbench. The grease-stained rag between them felt inconsequential. Outside, a car honked. They jumped apart as a customer pulled into the lot. Isaac shoved the drawing into his pocket like a secret. Saturday, Diane blurted. Lyla has this thing at the children's hospital. They're doing a superhero day for the oncology ward. She twisted her wedding ring, the habit she'd never broken. She asked if you'd come, as her sidekick. Isaac's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked utterly lost. I don't own a cape. Diane smiled, real and bright. She's already making you one. Purple, with sequins. The wrench clattered to the floor as Isaac laughed, a deep, surprised sound that seemed to startle even him. And in that moment, with flour dusting her shoes and oil staining his hands, Diane realized she wasn't just bringing coffee to say thank you. She was bringing it because she wanted to see him again. The garage lights flickered as Diane traced the book's spine with her thumb, the weight of Isaac's confession still heavy in the air. Lyla would love this, she started to say, but the words died when she noticed the inscription on the first page in faded blue ink. For my brave explorer. Love, your big brother. The date beneath was just 2 weeks before Emily's passing. Isaac was staring at his coffee, his knuckles white around the mug. She made me read it to her every night, even when... His voice cracked. Even when she couldn't keep her eyes open. Diane didn't think. She crossed the small space and wrapped her arms around him, feeling the tension in his shoulders, the way his breath hitched, before he slowly relaxed into the embrace. The scent of motor oil and cheap detergent filled her nose, as his hands came up to rest lightly on her back, not pulling her closer, not pushing away, just existing in the moment. When they parted, Isaac's eyes were red-rimmed but clear. You should know something, he said, reaching into his wallet. He unfolded a crumpled hospital discharge form, Lyla's from last week's emergency. At the bottom, in the physician's notes, patient continues to respond well to new treatment protocol. Guarded optimism for remission. Diane's knees nearly gave out. They told you before me. I made them call while you were in the restroom. His calloused thumb brushed the edge of the paper. Didn't want to. I don't know. Steal your moment. The bakery box sat forgotten on the desk as Diane pressed her forehead to his shoulder, laughing through tears. Outside, a delivery truck backfired, startling them apart. The spell broke, but something new remained. That night, as Lyla traced the stars Isaac had drawn in the margins of The Little Prince, Diane found herself dialing a number she'd avoided for years. Her mother-in-law's voice was wary when she answered. Lyla's going to beat this, Diane said without preamble. And when she does, I think you should meet someone. Through the window she watched Isaac walk across the parking lot, his silhouette backlit by neon, as he carried 2 milkshakes, 1 strawberry, 1 chocolate toward her building. Lyla's giggle floated from the bedroom as she turned a page. Mr. Teddy says the prince needs a mechanic for his spaceship. Diane smiled, pressing the phone tighter to her ear. Yeah, Mom. Someone special. The glow of the computer screen cast shadows across Isaac's face as he scrolled through yet another database, his eyes burning from exhaustion. 3 nights straight, he'd done this, cross-referencing donor lists, medical journals, anything that might give Lyla a fighting chance. A half-empty coffee cup sat beside a framed photo of Emily, her gap-toothed smile a silent reminder of why he couldn't stop. He was about to call it a night when an email notification popped up. Subject: potential partial match. Urgent review. His pulse spiked as he clicked it open. A 24-year-old firefighter in Denver was an 810 HLA match, not perfect, but closer than anything else they'd found. Isaac's hands shook as he forwarded the message to Dr. Patel with a single line worth testing. The reply came faster than expected. Yes. But we need family tested first. Isaac stared at the screen. He knew Diane had no living relatives. She'd mentioned it once when Lyla was first diagnosed. His mind raced. Then, he did something reckless. Oh. Diane was rinsing a dinner plate when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it until the preview text flashed Lyla's donor search. Call me ASAP. Isaac. Her soapy fingers fumbled to answer. What's wrong? Put Lyla to bed. Isaac said, his voice tight with something she couldn't name. Then meet me at the garage. Bring her baby pictures. The garage smelled of bleach and desperation when Diane arrived. Isaac stood over a makeshift workstation, his sister's old Little Prince book propped open beside vials, cotton swabs, and a DIY cheek swab kit he'd bought online. I need to rule myself out, he said, without preamble, holding up a photo of Emily at 8. The resemblance to Lyla was uncanny. Same dark curls, same stubborn chin. My sister's type was rare. If I share even some markers. Diane's breath caught. You think you could be a match? I think, Isaac said, swabbing his own cheek with clinical precision, that I won't sleep until I know. He dropped the sample into a prepaid lab envelope, his hands steady now. There's more. That firefighter in Denver, he's willing to donate if needed. But first, he held out a fresh swab. Let's see if fate owes us one. Diane's tears hit the concrete floor as she pressed the cotton to Lyla's sleeping lips earlier that night. The envelope sat between them, like a promise. Outside, a late-night bus rumbled past its headlights, cutting through the dark. Somewhere in the city, a child laughed, and for the first time since Dr. Patel's office, Diane felt the faintest spark of hope. The waiting room clock ticked louder with each passing minute. Diane paced until her shoes rubbed blisters on her heels, then sat staring at the vending machine's flickering lights. Isaac appeared silently beside her, holding 2 steaming cups, hot chocolate, the kind with extra marshmallows Lyla loved. Anonymous donor, my ass, Diane whispered, taking the cup. Her fingers brushed the fresh bandage on his inner elbow, hidden under his flannel sleeve. Isaac didn't deny it. Just pressed a crumpled drawing into her palm, Lyla's crayon sketch of Team Brave, from weeks ago now, with a 4th figure, added a stick figure firefighter with Isaac's tool belt. The surgical doors burst open. Dr. Patel's mask dangled around his neck, his smile brighter than the OR lights behind him. She's stable. Engraftment looks promising. Diane's knees buckled. Isaac caught her, his grip firm as the sobs she'd held back for months tore through her. Around them, nurses cheered. Somewhere in Denver, a firefighter high-fived his crew. And in recovery, a little girl dreamed of spaceships and teddy bears, her blood humming with borrowed strength. When Lyla woke, her first words were slurred, but clear. Mr. Teddy says, tell Isaac. Breakfast is served. The room erupted in laughter. Even Dr. Patel snorted. But Isaac just pressed his forehead to Lyla's tiny hand, his shoulders shaking. Diane watched them through tears. The sticker on Lyla's IV bag caught the light, a red heart, just like the one Isaac had given her that first day. Faded now, but still holding fast. The balloons trembled as Lyla blew out her 5th birthday candles with all the strength her recovering lungs could muster. The apartment glowed with fairy lights. Diane had strung up tiny stars against the dusk, settling outside the windows. Isaac stood by the cake, one hand steadying Lyla's elbow, the other still stiff from the donor surgery. You forgot to make a wish, detective, he murmured as the last candle flickered out. Lyla grinned, her cheeks still thin, but flushed with life. Already got it. she declared, then promptly plucked the frosting-laden bee from her birthday cake and smeared it onto Isaac's nose. The room erupted in laughter. Diane's the loudest, her head thrown back in a way she hadn't done in years. Later, when the guests had left, and Lyla slept curled around her bear, now sporting a tiny nurse's cap, Diane found Isaac on the balcony. His sling was gone, but he still favored his left arm. She handed him a beer, their fingers brushing in the transfer. "You know," she said, leaning against the railing, "Lila's not the only one who got a second chance that day." Isaac took a slow sip, his eyes on the city lights. "Funny thing about Marrow," he said after a while. "Grows back stronger, where it's taken." The admission hung between them, fragile as the first time he'd carried her daughter. Diane turned to face him fully. "Stay," she said simply. "Not just for tonight. Not just until Lila's stronger." Isaac's breath caught. In the living room, the hospital discharge papers fluttered on the fridge, held by the same heart-shaped magnet that once secured Lila's crayon drawings. The donor line still read, "Anonymous." But the truth was written everywhere else in the extra toothbrush by the sink. The mechanic's boots lined up beside tiny, sparkly sneakers. The way Lila's eyes lit up when he walked in. He didn't answer with words. Just reached for Diane's hand, his calloused thumb tracing the same path Lila's small fingers had earlier, when she joined their hands for the birthday wish. Above them, a real star flickered through the light pollution the kind city kids rarely see. The kind worth making promises under. Inside, the fridge hummed. The clock ticked. And in her bed, Lyla dreamed of spaceships and teddy bears, and a love that came in through the cracks, unexpected, as a mechanic with a hero's heart. The city hummed below them, a symphony of car horns and distant laughter, but up on that balcony time seemed to slow. Lila's small hands still clutched their clothes, her head now drooping with exhaustion against Isaac's side. Diane watched as he carefully adjusted his stance to bear her weight, his fingers brushing the star-patterned fabric of Lila's dress with the same reverence he'd once reserved for engine parts. "Open your present," he murmured, nodding toward the gift still clutched in Lila's limp fingers. Diane helped peel back the wrapping to reveal a small velvet box. Inside lay 3 interlocking rings, one large, one medium, one tiny, each engraved with coordinates. "Emily's favorite place," Isaac said, his voice rough. "Where we scattered her ashes. Now she'll watch over all of us." Diane's breath caught as she turned the smallest ring in the light. The coordinates glinted, not just a location, but a promise. Somewhere beyond the skyline, a subway rattled by its rhythm, matching the sudden pounding of her heart. Lyla stirred, blinking sleepily at the rings. "Like astronauts," she yawned, pressing her cheek to Isaac's ribs. "Family in the stars." The simplicity of it shattered Diane's last defenses. When she looked up, Isaac's eyes held the same quiet wonder she'd seen the day he first carried her daughter upstairs, as if he still couldn't believe he got to stay. The night breeze carried the scent of vanilla frosting and gasoline of hospital disinfectant and fresh starts. Somewhere below, a car backfired, and Lyla startled awake just long enough to whisper, "Don't let go," and they didn't. Not when the last balloon deflated, not when the fairy lights flickered out, not when dawn painted the skyline gold. The rings stayed threaded together on Diane's keychain, a silent testament to the most improbable of miracles, a family forged, not by chance, but by countless small choices to hold on. The autumn leaves had turned to gold by the time they returned to the apartment stairs where it all began. Isaac carried Lyla now not out of necessity, but because she demanded the royal treatment on her first day back at school. Her backpack, covered in dinosaur stickers, thumped against his shoulder with each step. Diane walked beside them, her hand finding Isaac's free one. She no longer flinched at the grease stains on his fingers. Now she knew each mark told a story. The dark smudge near his thumb. From fixing Mrs. Wetmore's leaky faucet at 3 a.m. The faint silver streak repairing the balcony railing. After Lila's spaceship launch. A jump that had ended in giggles and a scraped knee. At the top step, Lyla wriggled down her sparkly sneakers, hitting the concrete with a decisive tap. Wait. She rummaged in her backpack and produced a slightly crumpled red heart sticker, the twin to the one Isaac had given her months before. With solemn ceremony, she pressed it to his work-worn hand. "For brave daddies only," she declared. The word hung in the crisp air, unexpected and perfect. Isaac's breath caught. Diane squeezed his hand tighter as Lyla marched ahead, already chattering about show and tell. Somewhere in the city, a mechanic's phone buzzed with a Denver area code, the firefighter donor checking in. Down the block, a young intern at the Children's Hospital pinned up Lila's drawing of Team Brave in the oncology ward. And on that ordinary staircase, 3 hearts beat in sync, proof that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single step. The end, or rather the beginning.